Well, good morning, everyone. Bienvenue à tous et bon matin. My name is John Wishart. I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. Welcome to the first installment of Recovery Road, the series. So much like those classic Hollywood movies that spawn follow-up movies or shows, the Chamber is following up on the success of our Recovery Road Summit last month to present a series of webinars on the topic of economic recovery. Now, today's debut is called The Experiential Economy. Where will retail need to move in the future? L'économie expérientielle ou le commerce de détail devra-t-il se déplacer à l'avenir? We are very fortunate today to have with us Matt Symes, the CEO and co-founder of Simplicity Designs, to lead us in this discussion. Now, as everyone on this call knows, the world has changed dramatically and permanently over the last 12 months. The pandemic has forever altered consumer behavior, and many of those new consumer habits have formed as a result of the low-touch, digital-first economy. We're spending more time on our screens than ever before, and the digital transformation over the past year has pushed all of us about 10 years into the future. This will impact your business, and have you thought about how and how you will respond? That's the focus of today's discussion. And to lead us in the discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Symes. Over the last 10 years, Matt has helped more than 400 organizations improve, innovate, and grow. He's a serial entrepreneur, portfolio manager, and, quote, recovering academic who loves to help business owners succeed. Matt completed his undergrad degrees at UNB and his MA at Wilfrid Laurier University. He's currently on leave from his PhD studies as he works to grow Simplicity Organizational Design. Avant de donner la parole à Matt, j'aimerais vous rappeler de ne pas hésiter à poser des questions. Vous pouvez utiliser les fonctions chat au bas de votre écran Zoom et n'importe lequel moment durant la présentation pour poser vos questions et nous tenterons de répondre au plus grand nombre possible. So now, without further delay, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Matt Symes. Matt?
Appreciate it, John. Merci bien. Okay, so we're going to talk for about 35-40 minutes. We're going to whip through what's changed. And in that, John's introduction, I've had the distinct pleasure of working with governments, working with small and micro businesses, working with our own businesses through the last 12 months. And though we've been relatively fortunate on the East Coast, the world has changed, consumer behavior has changed, and there is little doubt that it'll have an impact on your business or your organization. I know we have a lot of not-for-profits here, and I know the Chamber just went through a strategic session themselves. This is impacting absolutely everybody. And so, before I start this talk, I just want to remind everybody here that what you're doing is hard, and I applaud it. If you try to lead anything, if you try to create, if you try to help move the needle forward, you are in the arena. And there will be no shortage of people who will heap various versions of critique on you. But I have one simple measure, and I stole this directly from Brene Brown. I have one distinct measure on whether I listen to that critique or not. Are you also in the arena getting your ass kicked? Because if you're not, I'll listen to you for about 30 seconds, but I don't have a tremendous amount of time for those who aren't in the arena. And all that means is I want to go to work every day and create. And as Brene Brown says, the only guarantee when you go to do that is that you're going to get your ass kicked. That's the only guarantee. But it's about getting back up. And we sure went through a whooping here in the last 12 months. We've all been thrown out of sorts. Small introduction as John went out. I didn't realize that my years in academia were going to play any sort of role in my business career. And I was badly mistaken when the pandemic hit. And one of the good fortunes of having studied history and the long arc of human interaction is that one of the things we did early on is went back to the 1918 pandemic immediately and said, what's this going to look like? What's the likely outbreak? There were 3 major waves, and in some cases 4 in 1918. And then following that came the roaring 20s. And so we are teetering right now between, are we going to see a significant third wave and where? And we're starting to see some of that creep up in Europe. And you know, the US are in a race against the vaccine versus the virus. And let's hope that they win with the vaccine. But it's interesting. Mark Twain is often quoted as saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. He didn't say that, but it sounds like something he would say. And I think it's wonderful to remember that. Normally, as humans, we look at too short of a window to understand our world. And if we would just expand it a little bit, we'd probably do ourselves a lot of service, because we're not the first ones to go through this problem. We won't be the last ones. And as a human species, we're pretty damn resilient. And if you're running a business or leading an organization, you've had to be resilient over the last 12 months. So kudos to you, and kudos to you for still being here, showing up. What's today going to look like? Here's the long version of the agenda. We're going to quickly review the virus where it is. We're going to review the world where it is. We're going to look at the future of business. Some of you have had the good fortune of tasting the coffee out front in the room. I point this way because it's literally out there. And in this hybrid event where we've had 11 of you here and we've got 13 of you online, this probably is some version of the next normal. But I'm going to go through epic chemistry as a case study. Then we're going to talk about your turn. And so, you know, folks, I got the question and answer field open. I've got the chat box open. This is for you. And so if there are questions, please load them in. For those of you who are sitting out front enjoying a brilliant coffee, I will pop out there after about 20 minutes on the Q&A, and we can have a nice in-person chat. That doesn't happen anymore. It's so nice to see people. Okay, so the official agenda was the one you just saw. This one is, what the hell do I do with this mess? And that's really where a lot of us are sitting. And so, folks, we're emerging from the Great Lockdown. Nowhere in human history have we ever attempted something like this. And the Great Lockdown was, the debate will go on forever afterwards, whether we should have, shouldn't have, how we could have handled it better. You've already seen Dr. Tam come out and say that had we handled it differently, we could have saved 13,000 lives. Folks, the other benefit of being a recovering academic is that you learn to judge decisions not by their result, but by the way they made the decision with the information they had at the time. It is totally unfair to talk about, I made this decision, this result happened, and I'm going to say that the decision was good or bad based on the result. There's too much in between. And if this last year hasn't taught us that, I don't know if we'll ever learn that lesson. So folks, I give a tremendous amount of credit to the way that our leaders in government have stepped up during this time, and our leaders in the not-for-profit sector have stepped up in this time, because they have had to lead without knowing what's going to happen the next day. And so folks, you know, the saying that we're all in this together is, it's a true statement, but it's never been more broadly felt than in the last 12 months, I don't think. The benefit and tragedy of modern society is that it is incredibly individualistic. We don't rely on our family and friends to put up a barn anymore. There's a certain sadness to that. It means that we're disconnected from community. And yet in this last year, through this tragedy, we have seen community come together. We have seen government come together. We've seen the science community come together and chase a vaccine. Folks, what I know from studying the best in the world is that the way in which the world got to a vaccine is the way that great organizations operate. It's also the way great networks operate. Learn, share, and leverage best practices. You're facing one problem. Your job as a business leader is to figure out what the most important problem is, and then look around you and go, who else has already figured that problem out? You don't have to learn all of it. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough time to learn every mistake. You don't have enough time to experience every mistake, rather. Okay, we're currently in the dance, folks. We talked about the hammer and the dance. And Thomas Puyo, I still go back to his blog. One of the other benefits of being a recovering academic is you learn to find your sources. And when you find your sources, You can go back to those sources because they do the heavy lifting for you on different topics. So where are your sources in your life? What are you curating in your fields? What are you curating in your email? What are you curating on your Instagram feed, in your Facebook? We have never been more responsible for the information coming at us. Notice the word responsible. It is up to you to curate that field, to curate those lists that come to you. So watch out for the Facebook feeds that don't serve you. Watch out for the echo chamber that we tend to create because we like to hear what we like to think we like, if you followed that. But if we got an echo chamber going on in this world, the Facebook algorithm is designed to feed you more of what you believe in, because you'll click on it more and you'll buy more. So the way to cheat the code in this modern world is to find your sources. Ideally, find some that don't agree with you. Find a lot that don't agree with you. Get them to send you emails so that you can play with the world and understand it in a different way. We're currently going through the dance, and the dance means this. We have 5 cases yesterday. We have 50 tomorrow. We have 200. We're going from lockdown back to red, back to orange, back to yellow, back to lockdown. That's the dance. And Thomas Puyo put this article out that we will go through the hammer and the dance about 3 weeks into the pandemic. And that's exactly what we've been experiencing in New Brunswick to some degree. And so and I said as of tonight, because I was writing this last night. As of last night, 121 million total cases, 50 million, 2.69 million deaths globally. It's hard to understand the calamity of this. 919,000 infected in Canada, 22,000 deaths. In New Brunswick, we've had 1,477 cases, 43 active cases today, 30 fatalities. And folks, last week, I went to a wake for my second cousin who succumbed to COVID-19. It's hard to put into perspective millions and thousands. Humans are not very good at exponential thinking. They're not very good at big numbers. They don't understand what that means personally. But when someone with your last name gets infected, and when someone with your last name succumbs to it, it becomes more real. I hope not many of you have to go through that. But folks, this virus has shook us to the core. And it shook us to the core because we don't really have any certainty around it. I love Mark Manson's line here. If there's one thing we know for certain about this pandemic, is that we know nothing for certain about this pandemic. And we continue to learn that we don't. Every time we think we have some variation of it understood, a new variant pops up because it's interacted with a human and morphed. And now we've got the UK variant that spreads way faster and doesn't discriminate on age, etc. We know for certain that border crossings and large gatherings are going to rely on the speed of the vaccine. We know that certain things are more dangerous than other things. We also now understand the arterial spray of when we just talk, which is an interesting thing that I didn't know beforehand, or at least the degree to which it can travel up to 2 aisles in a grocery store. We also know which occupations are at greater risk of contraction. Now, this will go for influenza as well, by the way. This will go for a lot of things. So these aren't just a COVID-19 information source. They're a larger information source if you want them to be. We know that we'll be dancing with masks for quite some time. And I mean, there's an argument to be made to adopt them full time. But this red type in there is the thing that got me early on. And folks, in late March, I am on video as saying that masks are useless, because that's what the World Health Organization said at that time. And then 2 weeks later, they said maybe they're not so useless, because if you wear one and I wear one, we won't spread it to each other. And so then you learn. And then I'm on video of saying, I've learned something new. That seems to be better information than what I knew yesterday. I'm going to adopt that one. And this is another thing that humans have a real difficulty with from time to time, which is changing your mind. Folks, one thing I'll say about this is don't let ego, pride, and the need to be right get in the way of understanding what is right. Too often we do that. If 60% of the people wear masks that are 60% effective, that would have been enough to control this epidemic. And it's a shame that in certain places in the world, we didn't have the leadership that stepped up and made that clear. It's too bad that became political instead of scientific. Folks, there are some benefits to the masks, by the way. Look at influenza and what it normally does year over year. And look at that red line. It has been functionally zero. I'll give you an idea. As of the 6th week of the year, there were on average in past years 18,000 people infected with some form of influenza. This year there were 51. So there's some interesting things going on in the world that are affecting businesses in a different way as a result of that. Sales of gum are way down. Some studies have them between 18 and 31%. Turns out if my breath is covered by a mask, I don't really care what it smells like. So that's fun. And for those who just had coffee, you can put your mask back on, you're good to go. You won't have coffee breath on anybody else, just on yourself. The other thing is NyQuil is way down. Sales of NyQuil are. Folks, the vaccine is quite something. We've got 400 million doses administered across the world, 3.4 million in Canada. The rollout is going fast and furious. The Americans are driving it. The Israelis are almost fully vaccinated. It's quite something to watch different countries manage it. And Canada will have an important decision to make out of this. We will have to decide what is a function of national security. We'll have to make that decision. We don't have any homegrown producers of the vaccine. When you saw that Canada bought 10 times as many as they needed, it wasn't because we wanted 10 times as many. It's because we understood the supply chain was going to be a nightmare and we didn't really know where we were going to get them. And so we're going to have to make a decision later on. Medical supplies, food security, all those kinds of things. But those are government questions. Those are leadership questions on the societal bit. I see a few people who have that position and have that voice on this call. You're going to have those conversations. Let's look at the economic outlook very, very quickly. And there's a reason why I'm cloaking this. We need to see the vaccine. We need to see the world. We need to see where's the economy move before we start talking about a part. This is another thing that I want to make sure that you recognize. Most individuals speak like this, part, and they go down the rabbit hole. How do we get people to go whole, part, whole? I don't know if a part is good until I understand how it impacts the whole. And so the reason why I'm starting with the world and the vaccine and then the economy is I'm not going to start talking about parts of what you can do in the experiential economy until we give the larger context. So the economic outlook, the next 12 to 36 months will be this. Survive some of the more flare-ups, the worst of the pandemic. We will go through various versions of the low-touch economy like we are today, masks on, socially distance, all that kind of fun stuff, the dance. And then we will move into the next normal, where those buying habits will have forever changed. Make no mistake, COVID-19 had a massive impact and it didn't hit people equally. The way this economy or this economic downturn has impacted women is just, I don't even know how we come back from it other than individual business owners recognizing that this has had a far greater impact on women than men. And for a number of reasons, there are just literally hundreds of articles on this. Some people are arguing that we've taken somewhere between 10 and 30 years, we've gone between 10 and 30 years back. And it's deeply impacted those on the lower end of the pay scale as well. And it's absolutely killed the service economy. And so while we talk about 6% decline in GDP, that's an average. What it's done to certain sectors is it's just completely killed them, right? And this is how we were talking about the economy and recovery previous. And this is for an economic recovery. And we learned all kinds of letters. So a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery, and an L-shaped recovery. Okay, so the V-shaped recovery is just a quick blurb and off we go. It was like Canada after the financial crisis. The U-shaped recovery is a significant downturn and off we go. Back up, you can see the second graph there, more like the US during the 2008 recession. The L-shaped recovery is really one that really never comes back. And that if you've been to Greece in the last 10 years, you will have seen this firsthand. It just completely crashed and never got back. So we were going, what's it going to be? Is it going to be V, U, L? What's it going to be? Turns out it's not going to be any of them. It's going to be K. I didn't even know this one existed. The K-shaped recovery talks about white collar professionals, those who can get on a screen and still do their work like this. Those that can do their work with social distancing, the construction world, etc. No problem at all. They're thriving industries. Service industries, where we have to have close one-on-one contact, just getting wiped away in this. So the job became for everybody to figure out where you are. And if you look across here, it talks about, if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see what is the severity and duration of the economic impact. You look at the top, you see impact on your organization. So the Board of Innovation, or lowtoucheconomy.com, came up with this grid. And when I work with organizations deeply, I ask them to go, where are we? Where are we? And, I've worked with a couple travel agents. They sit at the bottom right. Last survivor strategy or get the heck out, right? And we've coached both. We've coached both. Some of them we've helped manage to create a thriving staycation market to service their current client need for adventure, etc., to make sure they hold on to it for when the world opens up. For others, they've just chosen, it's just too hard. They've just chosen a new profession. You got to figure out where you are. And this PowerPoint presentation will be yours afterwards. But where are you on this? Where are you today? We're 12 months into this thing. So some things have steadied and we're going to understand it, but we're going to get a boost coming out of here. So everybody's going to go through a hockey stick of some ilk. And it doesn't necessarily mean you faced a downturn. Some of our clients have immediately saw spikes. I mean, if you're in the construction world, I remember very early on, an individual who owned backyard landscaping and pool company got a hold of me and was very, very concerned about the future state of their business. And we talked it out. We went through all the exercises, and it became very, very clear as we walked through the questions that he was going to have his best year ever, because people are going to stare at their own backyards with nowhere else to go. And what are you going to want? Something to do in it. And he did, in fact, have his best year and his most profitable year. It's a good thing we asked that question, because he ordered twice as much as he was going as he normally did in a year, instead of what a lot of his competitors did, which was order half as much out of fear. He ordered twice as much. He did about 30% more revenue, and he did 80% more margin last year. It's so taking a step back and understanding how this impacts you becomes really critical if you're going to make good decisions moving forward. Worked with a garage door company. They did the opposite. They said, oh, we got to save the cash. They didn't order any of the supplies. And then by June, they couldn't get anything. Supply chains gummed up. They couldn't get anything at all. And what was amazing is in March and April, everybody was selling the stuff off like crazy, trying to get cash, worried about it. And if you had some reserve cash, you could get a whole, well, look what the stock market did in March of 2020 compared to today. Right? There's a few of us who wish we had put some money in there in the right places. Okay. So you got to, what hockey stick are you going to go through? And Mo's sitting out in the front room. I give Mo a lot of credit. He goes, Matt, this is going to be totally different than the other ones. If you know Mo has a little bit of gray in his hair. So he's been through the war 4 or 5 times, maybe 6. And he said, Matt, this is going to be a lot more like the Rocky Mountains. So everybody's going to go through a hockey stick, but it's going to look jagged. And we've seen that through the dance. It's awful hard to separate the noise from the signal and figure out what matters and what doesn't matter. And folks, nobody gets this perfect. We've been caught in thinking we saw something, we didn't see it. It's all about sorting out the fog from what really matters, getting through it, and piloting big enough that you learn, but small enough that it doesn't ruin your business. Remember this, because as we get to the story of epic chemistry, I think there's a lot of these lessons that we were able to do well. Now, I've done it in other businesses, and I'm happy to answer later where it didn't work. So, this is not, hey, look, we always get it right. You're in the game of business here. You're not always going to get it right. You're going to get it wrong as much as you're going to get it right. So, folks, this is about you. This is about you. You don't need to be the average. You do not need to be the average. You can figure a way through this and thrive through this. So what has really changed? What has really changed? So this is where we jump from the virus, the world. Now we're going to talk about what do we think, where's the world moved? A lot of words on this slide, but I'm going to go through each one of them because I think these points become really instructive for where our organizations have to move to serve our clients. The digital transformation has occurred. 10 years of e-commerce adoption has happened in the last 12 months. If you follow the 10-year trend from 2009 to 2019, and then you look at what's happened in 2020, it's unreal. Global retail down 3%, e-commerce up 32.4%. It's projected to grow another 14.3% above that in 2021. 75% of buyers and sellers now prefer digital options. That includes B2B, folks. That includes B2B. Major Canadian banks are requiring intelligent digital strategies as part of their lending considerations now. So I want you to think about something. When you grow a business, there are 4 points of leverage to grow a business: labor, capital, code, and media. In 1983, 84% of the world's wealth was a tangible asset. You could touch it. It was a piece of machinery. It was a building. It was gold. You could touch it. Today, less than 10% of the world's value is a tangible asset. Think about that. If anybody saw recently the non-fungible token, the NFT, that sold for $69 million and just shook your head, I did too, because I don't think I'd buy a JPEG for 69 million, but that's because I still remember landlines, and I remember when the internet made a sound before you could get on it, and it took way too long to get to anywhere. So, but this next generation doesn't. And so this world is moving, and you've got to understand the digital world. It just got shoved 10 years into the future. So what does that mean for your customers and their buying habits? What's it mean for the employees? Folks, I know that our working model, like coming to an office, no, it was somewhat hybrid before. We were mostly on site with other clients and then in the office when we weren't. I know from this point on, it'll be a hybrid model of remote work when we have to do remote work, have office space. I mean, we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like, right? So both from the customer side and your employees, what's that look like? The major thing that I want to focus on here, though, is the transition of the customer. Major B2B players are now pushing direct to customer. They're just skipping the middle person. So a lot of retail shops rely on, I buy a product at wholesale, I sell it at retail, I make my margin. More and more, those manufacturers, through a digital strategy, are going straight to the consumer. So what does that mean for traditional brick and mortar retail? What does that mean? Gary Vee, who I love to listen to because he just talks a million miles a minute, but he also has some gems, and he is just a wonderfully authentic individual to interact with, said this: I'm excited for the future of retail because you know what? You're going to see a ton of new concepts at stores that are going to be fun, because they're going to be forced to do more than just having the widget there. He doesn't say experiential retail. That's the term for it. We're moving towards, when I go to a location, I'm going for an experience, not for the widget itself. That's where we're moving more and more. So how do we go from defense to offense? And I always love throwing a Gretzky quote in. When I gave this presentation in South Africa, which, by the way, that was digital, but when I gave it in South Africa, they didn't know who Wayne Gretzky was. That's fine. You all do. I want to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been. So the story of Epic, it's a bit of a serendipitous story. So the front of that building, some of you who are out there right now, Maxime, I think you're out there, you would have seen it as a boardroom. And we wanted to get into coffee. About 4 years ago, rather, I transitioned from enjoying fine wines to enjoying fine coffees. Cheaper. The net result of 3 coffees is a little bit of jittery, but no regrets. So wanted to figure out how to do that. And then enter Connor, who served today, does a wonderful job of bringing you on a journey. And we were going to get into coffee and we're going to open a cafe. And we were getting ready to figure out how to do that. We visited Calgary in January, I believe, December of 2019. We were going to the best cafes in Canada and learning from some of the best roasters. And we were getting ready to go, okay, the front room, maybe not the front room because simplicity still needs it. Then the pandemic hit. Okay. Coffee is simple, but good coffee relies on you. So I'm going to coffee because I want to explain coffee for a second, then come back out to how we arrived at a tasting room rather than a cafe. When it comes to wine, you uncork the bottle, you really can't screw it up unless you put it in temperatures that don't like wine, like really cold or really warm. But for the most part, they've done all the work for you. All you have to do is open it up and enjoy it. Okay. When it comes to coffee, that's not the case. When it comes to coffee, there are three distinct phases of the cherry. There's the farm, then it goes to the roaster, and the roaster puts their twist on how they believe that cherry should turn into a coffee bean. And from there, you get the coffee bean. Now, Connor's quite fond of telling everybody that I was the master for quite some time and still do it from time to time of turning really good coffee into sludge, not great coffee in the end, really good beans into bad coffee. I'm getting better. But when I have a bad coffee, I always assume that I am the reason because I'm still not great at it. But coffee comes down to this. It comes down to four things: grind size, water temperature, ratio, and brew method. And what I was amazed by is you could have an espresso from the same type of bean that you could do a pour over with, and you could have a drip coffee, or you could have that in a latte. Four different versions of the same bean made with slightly different brew method, slightly different water temperature, slightly different grind size. And in the case of the latte, we're adding milk. It was amazing, but it also made me realize that most people don't really know what they like in coffee, and they don't really understand what good coffee is. And one of the things I'm going to say, sometimes this is controversial to say, but I don't care, I'll say it. The world has been trained to like dark roast. Okay. We've been trained to like dark roast because the easiest way to make coffee taste consistent from multiple farms is to bring it into a roastery from multiple different areas, so it has all different tastes, and burn it. So dark roast is basically burnt coffee. And that's so that I can have beans from multiple different places and they taste the same. Okay, so I didn't like, that's that cigarette ashtray thing. I didn't really like burnt coffee. It's why lots of people need to put milk and sugar in it to make it palatable. We like the caffeine, but we need the milk and sugar. Okay, I'm going on about coffee. But the reason I'm going on about coffee is that we wanted people to connect with this excellent coffee we're bringing in. We're like, how are we going to do that? We're not going to do a cafe because the world shut down. And nobody really understands when we just say words about it. A tasting room is born. So lots of words again, but I put it on here so you can follow the thinking. Cafe isn't going to work. Wholesale won't buy because they can't taste the difference in quality and they don't really understand specialty coffee. Everyone drinks coffee. Few have had amazing coffees. How do we get people to taste the difference? So then you see Zach on the far right there. Zach said, we got to bring them in to taste it. I'm like, dude, there's a pandemic going on. How are we going to do that? We'll just bring them in small groups. And so that we had 2 people come in and we said, well, we want to impress them with the whole thing. So big setup. Connor and Zach went to work on how we get them to connect to the bean, how we understand where this came from, who produced it, how it can taste different through different extractions. And the 2 were sitting at the bar, were blown away. They're like, what is this? I've never experienced coffee like this. This is incredible. Like, that kind of worked. So then we said, wow, the tasting room could potentially be a gateway to help people experience the difference in coffee and connect with what they like out of coffee. So the tasting room was born, and we didn't know if it was going to be a blowaway success. We put it out there, we had a few people in, and then it just started to gain momentum. And, listen, we're not fooling ourselves. When you can't visit the world, but there is a way that you can have the world visit you through coffee, and people are basically held hostage in one area, New Brunswick, with trying to find different things to do, this became an opportunity. Now, it's not terribly surprising when you reverse engineer it that it works, because we love going to wine tastings. Why wouldn't we love going to coffee tastings? So we became the place where you could taste the highest end coffee, where you could experience coffee in a totally different way. A value stream was born. Still not a business, a value stream was born. Then we moved into a full business. We brought the potential wholesalers in. Same experience, purchases began. We offered safe tastings. More people came in. We understood all the social distancing rules, made sure that when we were in orange or yellow, where could the tables be, etc. And the whole goal, our whole goal starting out, was to help people connect with coffee in the same way that Connor and I had when we started this venture. It became a routine. It became a moment of contemplation. It became an opportunity to have a good conversation. It was more than a cup of coffee for us. And even the process of making it becomes a ritual that you can incorporate into your life. And it's an everyday ritual. So think about this. We were able to help people connect to coffee in a whole different way and really understand what they like about it, challenge what they like about it. And a lot of people come in thinking they need sugar and milk in their coffee, and they leave loving a delicate pour over. Interesting. So then it became, can I get your coffee regularly? Yes. Let's bring the best coffees in the world in to complement our roast, but we're going to be the gateway roast. And you'll see that we have the Epic 6. And the Epic 6 is sitting out there, and that is your coffee tasting coffee. It's meant for the morning. Then we're about to launch the 9, and then we'll launch the 3. And the idea is that as you progress during the day, you get slightly more adventurous in what you might like out of your coffee. So the subscription program was born, and monthly recurring revenue, which that's stable revenue for a business from both direct to consumer and wholesale clients, really critical. Really critical if you're going to support that base. Now, just 3 weeks ago, we were able to hire our first colleague. So you see Rochelle there. And Rochelle, you would have seen her in the tasting room. It's been amazing to have her come on. She's an incredible barista, unbelievable with coffee, wants to be a roaster. One of the words that struck me and really warmed my heart when we interviewed her, she said, I was going to be in coffee. I was always going to be in coffee. I just didn't think I would be able to do it in Moncton. Now she's going to get that opportunity. The roaster should be in the next 8 to 12 weeks. The bigger roaster, we have a small little Ecoa, and we'll be roasting coffee right here on 400 St. George. Okay. Applying the principles to your own business. So I tried to help you walk through the Epic journey, but let's talk about applying these business principles to your own business. And it starts with the most important questions. 3 questions. They all come back to the same thing. What problem do you solve? For who? And what is the value of solving that problem? Now, folks, I know that there are a few people from government organizations. This is probably way more important in your world. There's a great book called We Don't Make Widgets in the government world that I believe everybody should read to understand what problem do they solve for who? What is the value of solving that problem? Because sometimes when we have stakeholders and voters and all kinds of people gnawing at us, we run around in circles and do all kinds of things. It's not easy. It's way harder, way harder to run government, not-for-profit, and chambers than it is to run a business. Way harder. Anyway, long story short, what problem do you solve? For who? What is the value of solving that problem? And I'll tell you where people get this all wrong. Some people have seen this before. I often ask this question: what problem is the milkshake solving? If I frame it another way in any of the sessions I do, and I say, help me make this milkshake better, I want to sell more of them. Immediately, people offer me 100 different versions, and they say, do this, do that, do this, do that. They don't ask the question, what problem does the milkshake solve? What job does it do? And I will make a long story very short here. The milkshake solves 2 problems. In pre-pandemic America, over 60% of milkshakes were sold to solo commuters going to work between 7 and 9 in the morning. Yeah, I said that, between 7 and 9 in the morning. And folks, you think, no, that can't be true. Starbucks found this information out and created the Frappuccino. What is the Frappuccino? It's an adult milkshake with caffeine. Okay, so folks, between 7 and 9 in the morning, that's where 60% were. Another 35% of milkshakes were sold to parents alone with their kids, mostly fathers. Mothers are just more responsible. So with that going on, there's only 2 customers that I need to worry about, only 2 problems I'm solving. The rest who buy a milkshake, that's fine. You buy what I serve. I don't make something for you. And what I needed to do in the morning is I needed to make it thick enough to last the morning commute. And what I needed to do in the afternoon was make it delightful for the family moment. Okay, interesting. How do I make it delightful for the family moment? How do I create that environment? Okay, I'm asking this because people get this wrong all the time. In groups, I ask who drinks V8, and there's always 1 or 2 who raise their hand. The rest of us have the same feeling. It's gross. I don't want to drink it. Why do people drink V8? They drink it because of this. It gives them their vegetable quota for the day, or it gives them 2 servings of vegetables. Hopefully they have more than 2. Here's the thing about that. V8 forgot that the problem they solved was vegetables, and they thought that the thing they did was create juice. I could see that. I mean, it's juice in a bottle. But they went and created more than 50 SKUs. Do you know that V8 today sells less revenue, or makes less revenue, sells less, and has less margin on that revenue with the 50 SKUs than they did when they had the one type in 3 different packages? Sometimes we forget what problem we solve, for who, and what the value of solving that problem is. V8 used to sit in the vegetable aisle. It doesn't anymore. So the sound principles of running a business haven't changed, but guess what has changed? Your customer buying habit. So how I get this in front of them, and your capability to execute for that customer. So I would ask you at a point in time to say, what problem were you solving pre-COVID-19? Who was your customer? What was the value? And the most important thing is, has that value changed? And how has it changed? How has it changed? I know that I likely will not, in any quick order, go back to the amount of business dinners that I had. I won't eat at restaurants nearly as much coming out of this pandemic. I will eat at a few very nice ones, but I won't eat 3 times a week. It's changed our habits as a family. Right? What has happened in your world? The most difficult thing to change is something that we do very well that no longer has value, because we get value from it. Do you still have a market? How has COVID-19 changed the way customers engage with you? Only 9% of businesses came out of the last recession thriving. All of those businesses understood their customer and invested in improvement and innovation and rebuilt stronger. They all morphed, they all changed. So I'm going to leave you with a set of questions. I'll rip through them. It's not designed for you to answer or really think about it right now, but I hope you take some time later. So John, I'm just going to rip through these and then we'll move over. The real key is, what problem do you solve for who? What is the value? How are you going to position yourself in the market? What profit model will you rely on? What is your moat? What's your competitive advantage? What are you leveraging? Labor, capital, code, or media? What capabilities must you have to do that? And folks, the last question, why are you doing this in the first place? What is your purpose? Why are you working so damn hard? Right? And this deck will go out to you. There's a series of books that I hope will help you get through these questions. They're the resources I rely on when I have to go back to basics. And I hope that it helps you think about the future of your business through a slightly different lens. John, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks very much, Matt. There was a lot of info packed into the last 40 minutes. I think I've heard and seen Matt 3 times in the last 10 months with virtual presentations, and I always leave thinking about issues and things, which is the byproduct of a great presenter. And also I had the opportunity to test out Epic coffee chemistry. And if you haven't been here, I highly recommend it. So it's now time for the Q&A portion. And I'd encourage everyone, if you have a question for Matt, please pose it in the chat function, and we'll get to those questions as much as we can. I'm going to start off with a couple, Matt. You mentioned, this right now we're in the low touch economy, and there's been this huge digital transformation. Do you see low touch becoming more of a permanent thing in our economy going forward?
I think that some of your habits and how you purchase will be the same as we did in the low touch. I think people are craving human connection and travel and all of that kind of stuff. And I think as soon as, I certainly know that ideally next January, I have a couple of weeks somewhere very sunny. But I do think that things like buying your grocery order, I'm not going back to spending, 90 minutes confused by where they move the stuff on me anymore. I'm ordering online. And I think that if I just want a pair of shoes and I know my size and I know the brand, I'm ordering directly from the brand. I'm not headed into. And so that, we're going to see the consequences of the low touch, I think, for quite some time. And I think we really need to understand, what does that mean? And as a result, what is my value? And I love that in Moncton, we have a place like Mike's Bike Shop, right? When you go to Mike's Bike Shop, the point of going to Mike's Bike Shop is not to buy the cheapest bike. You go there because they are the most knowledgeable, arguably in Atlantic Canada, and probably well beyond, at getting you on the right bike. And so, when I think about brick and mortar and I think about what this means in the future, I think about really doubling down on what you're good at that you can get paid for. I'm not looking at price tags when I walk into Mike's. If I'm price conscious, I'm going somewhere else for a bike. It's not the point. I'm buying Mike's Bike Shop's expertise, right? So really doubling down on what that is and finding more of those clients instead of trying to please everybody, because this low touch economy has created optionality that people didn't realize before. So a lot of people who didn't purchase online in any meaningful way have now developed habits where they've realized, wow, I get a lot of my time back. I'm probably not going back to the old way. So I think we're going to deal with the consequences of it I don't think we're going back. It doesn't ruin anything. It just segments things.
Question from the chat. How can local vendors take full advantage of the buy local trend, which we're seeing both locally and across Canada, but in an online context? We can't be Amazon necessarily, but so how do we compete?
Yeah, so the buy local trend is massive, and it's very, very pertinent and real in Atlantic Canada. I can speak from direct experience. In Nova Scotia, we launched Nova Scotia's Community Hall, which is a local subscription box, $52 a month. It brings local vendors to local consumers. Okay. And what we realized, we launched this, we started working on it on week 2 of the pandemic, because what we saw right away was a market that wanted to support local and a series of local vendors who weren't equipped to deal with the online world, weren't equipped, and they weren't going to get there quick enough. And so what we wanted to do was create a brand that could connect people to local alternatives. So this is not a story about Community Hall. This is about, hey, what do we do if we're a local vendor? The thing is, make it easy for me. And how can you make it really easy for your raving fans, your loyal customers? And I can't stress this enough. Over Christmas, I made a commitment to buy local, no matter the hurdles I had to go through. Well, I'm going to tell you that one place in Moncton I tried to get a hoodie from. I tried to buy it online. There was nowhere to even see it. So couldn't see it. I saw it in one of the flyers, one of the great Excellence NB flyer. So then I tried to buy it online. There was no shop. I called. They said, yeah, we're open most of the time between these times. Stop by. Stop by. We're in red. What do you mean stop by? So I had to wait until we weren't in red anymore to stop by and go in. And I'm like, they could not have made that more difficult for me to get that hoodie. Now, my commitment to local this Christmas made me do that. Next Christmas, no chance. If you haven't figured out how to make it easy for me to support local, I'm not likely to support it. Now, folks, there's no reason why this can't be relatively easy. Shopify, a great Canadian company, has made local e-commerce really quite easy to manage, but it does take learning. And as a business owner, if you are a local vendor, you need an online presence that connects. So I hope that helps.
Yep. Great question here in the chat from Ann Basque of downtown Moncton Centreville. You know, there are a lot of established retailers in our downtown core, and they're having trouble getting people back into their businesses.
Yeah.
How do they pivot to a more experiential economy as a local independent?
Yeah, there's a few ways that I'll answer this, and I think one of the most important things is really understanding who are your ideal clients today and what do they value, and what am I offering, and how do I connect that in an experience that brings people in that leaves them feeling amazing. How do I do that? So whatever, it doesn't matter what you're selling. If you're selling, if I think about some of the shops downtown, I immediately go to, there's a bunch of the cafes, restaurants, and then I think of the apparel shop. I think it's got, I forget what the name is itself, but I always love walking in there. The one that sells all of the unique local insignia on it, has home and New Brunswick. And so I think about how do they make an event where they connect to the local area, local culture. My Home Mercantile. Thank you, Nadine. Appreciate that. There we go. And got it too. I love walking in there. Couldn't remember the name. Love walking in there, but they need to get me back in there, and they need to get me back in there in a safe, fun way. So I would be thinking about what are all the events that you can put on? What are all the ways you can create in a safe environment where you can connect people back to what they love? If I'm like, folks, there's a huge surge in ethnic food buying. People are craving adventure, absolutely craving it. So how do you satiate the need for adventure with your brand and bring it back together? I'll take one step back. Getting people back in is one thing, but keeping connected to your loyal tribe is absolutely critical. What does your email list look like? How are you interacting with that email list? How are you adding value? What I will tell you is if all of your emails are buy my shit, it's not going to help you. It just isn't. Nobody wants to hear that. What they want is they want you to add value to their life. So 80% of your correspondence needs to be adding value to someone's life, not asking them to open their wallets. And that's another mistake that I find local vendors make all the time. They are quick to say, buy this, and it's not their fault. Folks, they're overworked, they're busy as hell. I get it. I'm there in a couple businesses. But can you step back and see the world from your customer's view and bring them back into your world digitally and in person as they're ready? It's going to be a journey.
Yeah, I can see perhaps fashion retailers pivoting from not just selling you the product, but being fashion consultants, helping you develop a wardrobe as part of the experience.
100%. 100%. There's a suit fitting area that you need to do by appointment downtown. And when you're coming in and you like Italian suits, you feel like you're walking into a small Italian suit shop when you walk in there, right? There's an espresso, there's biscotti, it's all sitting there, right? So, okay.
Okay. One more here. I've heard a few economists say, and I'm appealing to your recovering academic side here, Matt.
Thanks, appreciate it.
That after the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919, we had the roaring 20s. Is it possible that there's this pent-up consumer spending and demand that's going to happen after this is over?
I think that's highly likely. Savings levels have never been higher in both the US and Canada. Desire for experience has never been higher. Materialism is not a huge need. So the difference between the roaring 20s a century ago and today is that we live in a world of abundance today versus 1919, 1918, where we lived in a world of just trying to get above base level poverty. So the difference, I think, in this roaring 20s will be people are going to start to recalibrate about what matters to them in this world. And we all know that experiences, especially when they end well, leave us far happier. And we make them, you know, it's the old fish story. We make them bigger in our minds, and you know, the small fish becomes a whale by the time you're done, which is great for the experience economy, right? Because we can dive into that. I think we will see the roaring 20s. And again, it won't repeat itself. We won't, but it will rhyme. It will rhyme. Now, there's a danger right now because the stock market has very, very overvalued companies on it right now. Like it's never been at this high on the PE ratio. And the other part that we're running into is we're going through the largest experiment in human history of printing money. And so now you're seeing, is the reserve currency going to remain the US dollar? We're seeing Bitcoin make a huge surge. We're seeing NFTs. So the whole idea of what is valuable in this world is being challenged in a different way than it was in those 20s. So I'd love to give you an overly positive response that says, hey, go march forward. But John, you know my father. I grew up in a world of see the world as it is, not as you wished it was.
Mm-hmm. Here you go. Well, Matt and folks, I think we're almost at the end of the hour. It's gone very quickly. And Matt, thanks again for just a really eye-opening, thought-provoking presentation. I know a lot of the people on the Zoom will want to get a copy of your presentation just so they can rethink about their own plans going forward. I want to thank everyone for attending today. This is the first of a series of Recovery Road webinars focusing on economic recovery. Special thanks to Matt and his crew here at Epic Coffee Chemistry for the few of us who are here to taste, test, and experience the experiential economy firsthand. A recording of the presentation as well will be made available on our chamber website within the next few days. So look forward to that. It's all part, I guess, of our attempts to inform, educate, and create some awareness around emerging trends and what we should think about as we consider our own recovery as business people. I'd like to thank our sponsors for the whole series, Wilson Insurance, Liberty Utilities, Commercial Properties, and I think I'm forgetting one, Xavier. CPA, yes, thank you for all our accountant friends. Hopefully you'll join us for the next Recovery Road series webinar. Watch our website and your email for news on that.
John, has there been a group that's more important than the CPAs in the last year trying to understand how to submit taxes?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, we've learned to appreciate our accountants in the last 12 months.
In a much more robust way, yep.
Yeah, yeah. So, merci d'avoir participé ce matin. Soyez prudents et au plaisir de se voir bientôt. Please stay safe, and we hope to see everyone very soon. Thanks again, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.